We are proud to announce our partnership with Great Lakes Tees. They offer soft, modern fit, premium athletic tees by fans, for fans. Head over to greatlakestees.com and use promo code SURVIVE for a 10% discount.
The inventory over there is pretty awesome. They have the Bless 'em t-shirt, the Landry inspired from Hard Knocks. That's a great shirt.
People are going to love that one. And then the world-renowned, this one I've seen all over, the Baker Mania shirt, which I will have very soon myself. Probably the funniest one I've seen is if you want to be an authentic Browns GM yourself, you can head over there for the old GM sweatshirt, John Dorsey sweatshirt.
The football guy.
Absolutely hilarious. GreatLakesTees.com. Check out the inventory. Once again, use promo code SURVIVE for a 10% discount. And you can hit them up also on Twitter all the time. They are on Twitter at Great Lakes Tees.
They're doing a Bernie Kosar autographed jersey giveaway. Go to their Twitter at Great Lakes Tees. Follow and retweet the post. I think they're giving that away Monday or Tuesday, so get on that right away.
Support Great Lakes Tees. You're supporting Surviving the Season. So thank you very much.
Browns 0-8 at home. Just sad.
I haven't heard you this down since Stocky Brown got fired. It's the game that we were in, and it's a game that we just don't finish.
I don't want to watch anymore.
Why? Why does it happen? I'm so sick of watching those plays.
0-16.
I definitely do not want to watch this all 22.
That's up and down to me. That looks like dysfunction. Surviving the Season, Season 3, Episode 6. We have a special guest. Jeff Risdon joins us today. He writes for the Browns Wire. They have a new app out. He'll talk about that at the end of the pod. Make sure you guys get on that. You can hit him up on Twitter at Jeff Risdon, Risdon, all one word. I'm Adam. Greg's here. What up?
Yo, what's going on?
We just cut this interview, so now we're doing the intro to it. It's awesome conversation.
Yeah, no, Jeff was great. Really appreciate him coming on. We messed up the first attempt to get Jeff on, and it was well worth the wait. So you guys, I think, are really going to enjoy this one.
So now I give you Jeff Risdon. All right, we're here today with Jeff Risdon. Jeff, thanks for coming on, man.
My pleasure to be with you guys. Thanks for having me on.
Our second shot at this without technical issues, so it looks like we can get this done.
Hey, so far so good. This is great. Let's do it, man.
Right on. So we want to start off like a little bit of your background and how you even got involved in the writing profession here about sports.
Yeah, sure. I am a Vermilion, Ohio native, proud Vermilion Sailor grad. Although I went to 3 different high schools. I've moved all over the place. I've always loved football. Growing up in Northeast Ohio, that's not really optional. And decided to make a career out of it when my wife got pregnant with our oldest son. She made more money than I did. It made more sense for me to stay home and try to pursue the passion, and it's worked out pretty well so far. So it's nice. Fun. It's a lot of hard work. It's honestly, writing about football sort of sucks the life out of watching football, and I don't think people appreciate that as much. But it's fun, man. It's the dream life, man.
Yeah, sometimes a podcast does that too. Do you guys do a podcast with your group?
We do. Mac Robinson does a Browns Wire podcast, and I'm on podcasts all over the place. I prefer to be a guest instead of a host. I hear myself talk enough when I'm talking home, back at the TV and everything. It's better when other people talk to me.
You got it like a good announcer's voice, though, man.
Yeah,
you should be proud of that.
Well,
I wish I had half of that.
I do radio work here in West Michigan. I live in the Grand Rapids, Michigan area now, and I'm on the ESPN affiliate here doing college football and Lions stuff for them. So I do get on the air every now and then.
Well, let's stick with that right there, that Lions. So I know you cover the Lions now. You when we spoke the last time when we had audio difficulties, we couldn't put anything down. I think you told me that you're a Lions fan, right?
I am.
Yeah.
I grew up, even growing up in Northeast Ohio, where I grew up, my grandparents lived in Sandusky, which meant we got WTOL as the CBS affiliate. We were over there just about every Sunday. They showed Lions games, so I watched the Lions when I was a kid, and the Browns. But I liked, this will sound stupid, I loved the uniforms. I loved Billy Sims. He was like one of the greatest. And then when they got Chris Spielman, that sealed it, because Chris Spielman was and is still my football hero of all time. From Ohio State, I have an Ohio State Spielman jersey. I used to go down to Buckeye games all the time with my dad, and he was the greatest, and he wound up being a wonderful Lion, and it's just stuck forever. And I married into a Detroit and Lions family, so it worked out pretty well.
Nice.
Awesome. So with I wanted to ask you about that. So you lived through the Lions 0-16, and now you've lived through the Browns 0-16. If we were to match this up as the complete opposite matchup of like Jordan versus LeBron here as the bottom of the barrel matchup, if you look at the two 0-16 teams, I mean, how do you compare and contrast those? Who's a better team? Who is in a better position going forward after that 0-16 season?
I actually wrote about this back in January, and my take was then, and I think it's actually more reinforced now that I've seen the Browns in action this year. There's no way the Browns should have gone 0-16 last year. There was too much talent on the roster, and coming out of it, my God, there is so much more talent in Cleveland now than there was on that Detroit team in 2009.
Right.
I mean, they had the 2008 Lions had Calvin Johnson, Cliff Averill, Corey Redding was still a decent player at the time, but like I think I did the tally that 39 of the 53 players on that roster did not play after the 2009 season. It was like there was that little talent going around.
So that was like us 2 years ago, basically.
It really was. Like second and third round picks from 2006, 2007, 2008. None of those guys stuck in the league for a second contract. It was scary. Yeah. Now they did have Stafford coming out of that, and Stafford and Calvin Johnson wound up being a pretty good combination. And to their credit, the offensive line wasn't nearly as bad as what Lions fans thought it was at the time. But my God, they didn't have any running backs who could compare with any of the three in Cleveland right now. They didn't have Myles Garrett. They didn't have Emmanuel Ogbah even. They didn't have the linebacking crew. From what I saw from the opener and what I saw in camp, the Browns have four linebackers who can start just about anywhere.
Right.
Those Lions, they sort of lucked into one guy, and that was it. I mean, coaching situation is a little different. I'm not a Hugh fan. I think that's fairly obvious from anything that's posted on Browns Wire.
Right.
And I blame him a lot for what happened last year. But he's got a shot to get it right. He's got a shot with a new offensive coordinator that I think can only help him. But Jim Schwartz, who was the Lions coach after they fired Rod Marinelli, wound up being the right guy to like get an 0-16 team in the right mindset to be more competitive. And he got them to the playoffs 2 years later. I hope that Hugh is that guy for Browns fans' sakes. But I got to tell you, the guy who I would have coaching the team is their offensive coordinator, Todd Haley, because he has that attitude. And I think we saw that in Hard Knocks. I know you guys want to talk about that, but the difference there between what Todd Haley said and how Hugh Jackson handled that is the difference between being 0-16 and the difference between being 5-11 last year. I really think that was hard to watch.
Yeah, that was probably the biggest takeaway that I think everybody got from that first episode was, it doesn't look like Hugh is very strong as a coach, And then I thought just looking at the coaching staff in general, besides Greg Williams and Todd Haley, I'm like, this is just not a strong group. They just don't seem like strong personalities here. But we could be wrong. We don't definitely, they cut that show up quite a bit, so we don't get to see everything.
But yeah, there's like, I think Bob Wiley is a good offensive line coach. He's been around forever. Al Saunders, another guy who's been around forever, has a decent track record of producing results, but it's a very odd match with Greg Williams and Todd Haley both being former head coaches, both being very dominant personalities, very profane guys. Hugh can be that way, but doesn't come across that way in public at all. And having Hugh as sort of the like CEO of the on-field product rather than being more involved in the day-to-day activities, that's going to be a very interesting thing to watch. And I don't know how that's going to go. And I think it's going to be fascinating to see that play out because managing Greg Williams and Todd Haley is that can't be an easy job.
That's two personalities that's going to take a lot of work. And I didn't mind the fact that they're having that discussion there, that Todd Haley should, if I'm a head coach of a football team, I want people to speak freely and have their opinions be thrown out there. But the answer that Hugh gives, well, I'm the guy in charge and that's it. I don't know if there could be a worse answer, in my opinion. Adam said the same thing last week when we were talking about it.
Yeah, it doesn't show off a whole lot of leadership to just flip the table over. Discussion's over. I'm the head coach. You're not. And yeah, it was kind of, if you got to tell people you're the leader, I'm not sure you are the leader.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Very well said.
So I saw that you wrote this morning about Des Bryant, and because that seemed to be a takeaway from the game. It looked to me our concerns after the game were short at O-line depth and wide receiver depth, and Des Bryant's out there. Looks like he might be coming in Thursday. What do you think here with Des Bryant, Jeff?
I am still not a Des Bryant supporter for Cleveland. I don't think he's what the team needs. I would say he is what the team needs if they are 6-6 and trying to make a playoff push, but at 0-0 and with some guys that you still have, I'm not ready to throw in the towel on CJ Board yet. I think he obviously needs to catch the ball better, but I've liked what I saw from him in camp. I think Rashard Higgins deserves a lot more of a shot to prove himself in the regular season with competent quarterback play. I think he's been great in camp. I think he's been one of the most improved players. So I'm not there with Dez yet, and one of the reasons is that Dez Bryant still has a lot more name value for fans, and that's okay because he was great in 2014. That was the last time he was good.
Right.
Since then, he's broken his foot, he's broken his kneecap, he's had a lot of issues, both on and off the field with his mouth and his petulant attitude, and he still thinks he's that Dez Bryant, and he's not anymore, and that's a problem. We see that a lot with older players who are trying to hold on to their past glory and they can't do it anymore. I think that's what Dez is doing. Now, does he still offer the ability to be better than CJ Board as an example? Yeah, he does. But is that really going to help the Browns in 2018, but also 2019, 2020? And I'm not sure that it would. Yes, they are thin at wide receiver and they do need to add somebody else, but I don't think Dez is the right guy.
Yeah, there's got to be someone out there that can sort of pop the lid off of a defense. Higgins has been improved, but he's not a burner on the outside by any means, and nor really is Landry. What were your thoughts on the giving away Coleman to the Bills for basically nothing, outside of maybe locker room issues? He was a dude that could at least run by somebody and make a safety look his way.
Yeah, he was. It was an interesting timing on it. Because I actually wrote a thing about how John Dorsey was smart for selling high on Corey Coleman. And this is before we knew what we were getting in return. And I'm thinking, okay, he probably got a third round pick for him because Coleman had stunk in camp. And then the 3 days I was in camp, he was fantastic. And I was one of the people who hyped him up. I'm like, oh my God, this is a new Corey Coleman, new and improved. This is great. He's going to be the number 3 receiver that the team so desperately needs when they get Josh Gordon back and with Travis Landry. And then he gets traded for a 7th round pick in the future.
Conditional, Jeff. Conditional.
Yeah. I might have jumped the gun on my analysis on that one. But there were definitely maturity and locker room issues where he did not fit in. And I have to think that it came not just from John Dorsey, but I think there was some consulting with some veteran leaders on the team. They're like, can we make this work? And apparently they decided not to. There was a long history there of him being on the wrong side of situations, not necessarily being the guy who instigated things, but he's a guy who needed to get away from some negative influences in his life, and he seemed reluctant to do that. It's probably the diplomatic way to say that.
Yeah,
right.
And that's why he's in Buffalo.
It's you brought up the leadership there. That's one thing that we often talk about here over the past couple of years. This is our 3rd year going into year 3. So we, as a podcast, we're 1-31. It's been a tough road up to this point for us. But we just think that we've been lacking leadership in a big way. And now you see Landry come out in that wide receiver room, right? And he gives out his big speech there. He obviously looks like a leader on offense from Hard Knocks. You see Tyrod looks like a leader showing up early, doing the things that he needs to do. I think Baker is, it's going to take time, but I think he's just a leader. That's just part of what he is. When you look at that defense, Kirksey's trying to be the leader there, but what do you think of Kirksey as a leader? What do you just think of the overall leadership of the Browns? You think we're in a different place this year than before?
Definitely. I think having Landry come in and set the tone in the wide receiver room is critical. Last year, that guy was Kenny Britt. Yeah.
Oof.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Yeah. So
you think about that, like how that's the one thing. If you can look at what Sashi did and just setting up a young receiver with no veteran presence there to kind of show him the ropes. I mean that might have a lot to do with why Corey Coleman is out of town right now.
Oh, absolutely. And that's partly on Sashi. It's some of it's on Corey too for not wanting to
Sure.
really push himself to get better and be with the right people. But when your veteran influence in the locker room is Kenny freaking Britt, come on. That's one of the things where the analytical department and treating the players as numbered commodities, which I think is the biggest criticism of Sashi, and that's a very fair criticism. I think that's where that whole philosophy failed. They didn't take into account any of the locker room dynamics that would be going on. They didn't take into account that you need veteran presence. That's losing Josh McCown. That was asinine with the young quarterbacks rooms that they had. Depending on
Jeff, did you get involved? Did you ever get into the Moneyball stuff? Did you ever read the book or anything like that?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, so do you?
Yeah.
Do you remember how Billy Bean's thing at first? They played the analytical game and whatnot, but then he realized, look, this locker room, I'm missing out on something. The locker room still isn't right, and then he had to cut ties with guys he liked just because they were a bad locker room presence. I believe it was Jason Giambi's brother, whatever the heck his name was, Jeremy Giambi. Yeah, remember? That was the sort of dynamic that I think you're right on there when it comes to Sashi. Like he was using his analytics to pick up these guys that should have higher upside, but it might have been slipping through the cracks on, okay, what is the downside of these guys? And it could be as a team member or a locker room guy.
Yeah, it's okay to take risks on that, but you have to understand that there's a reason why these players are available. Right. And I don't think Sashi ever once considered that. And that's something that John Dorsey does take into account, although I don't think he's taking it as seriously with Des Bryant as he maybe should. We'll see. I don't know.
That's one thing that's hard for us because we go through all this draft stuff and you pick out the guys that we like and there's athletic profile, but we never get to actually talk to the kids. So it's hard from like a podcast point of view to really analyze or discuss those things. You almost have to throw them out because we just don't know.
Yeah, we get the tape. We get to, we can watch all the tape. You can see what they can do on the field, but you don't know personality. And personality matters, I think, a lot more than what we give credit for. If you have a guy like Landry, who he's not as athletically gifted, even close to even what Corey Coleman is. But when your attitude is you're going to come in, you're going to work 110%, 7 days a week, all the time, then you're going to raise your game up to a level of, it doesn't matter what your athleticism is at that point. You're raising your game up just based upon pure heart.
Yeah, and I think you guys brought up Christian Kirksey earlier. I think Kirksey is a guy he strives very hard to be a leader and to maximize everything that he's done. And I think he's a very good presence because Jamie Collins, very good football player, not really a leadership, kind of his own guy, sort of on his own island there. Schobert is showing a little bit of that. He's young yet. Kirksey's been on this team longer than anybody. That's crazy to me. But it's also like I think he feels more of a responsibility this year, and I think we're seeing him step up into that. And I think the players in general tend to respond very favorably to him. Losing Joe Thomas on the offensive side, that's why adding Tyrod Taylor was so critical, and Jarvis Landry, getting that presence. Carlos Hyde is a guy who's not afraid to speak up and show people how to do things the right way and tell them how it's been done in other places that were successful. Or in his case, not so successful in San Francisco.
Right. All right. Well, let's actually let's talk a little bit about that Chubb and Hyde battle. Chubb had a tough night. I don't think he had anywhere to run. I would say that was
totally agree.
No fault of his. Or I mean, even in Hyde's one carry, he had nowhere to run. I thought the offensive line was pretty pitiful. I think Haley recognized that by running the ball 33 times for like 51 yards. He just kept going to it like, we need to work this bad. What do you ultimately feel is going to happen with that running back room?
I think they're going to be split fairly evenly this year. And I actually revised a little bit. I thought that Hyde would get a few more carries now the fact that they're pushing Chubb so hard and he got a lot of action, and I think you're going to see him get a lot of action in the preseason. I tend to think that they like what they see in him. He's got an explosiveness coming out of a hole that Hyde doesn't have and Duke Johnson doesn't have. He had a couple of runs in a couple of weeks ago when I was at camp. He had a play where he just clipped the left tackle as he's going around it. And it's one of those deals where the linebacker is closing so fast, and if he doesn't like hit the hole exactly when he does and burst out of it, he's going to get slammed. And he ran right past the closing linebacker. And that's not something that's common, and that's not something that Hyde can do. So I think that intrigues Haley a lot. But Hyde's a very good all-around player. And I think I think you're going to see kind of a 40-40-20 split in the carries, but Duke is going to catch a whole lot of passes, especially now that Coleman's gone. I think you're going to see him at receiver a lot, and I'm okay with that. There's nothing wrong with having three capable running backs. When you're coming out of, I think we were all disappointed by what happened with Crow last year. I had high hope for him, and it didn't materialize. I'm not so worried about what happened in the opener because the Spencer Drango was just god awful blocking up front, and the rest of the line seemed far more focused on pass protection, and I think they did a very good job in that. In watching the game a second time around, Mayfield had a lot of time. Tyrod could have rocked a baby to sleep a couple of times on throws, so I was very pleased with the pass protection. Run blocking, not so much, but if you got to have one or the other, you want to have your quarterback protected. So I'm okay with that, but good Lord, the offensive line depth, that was rough, man.
But especially with Zeitler out right now. Zeitler's out, and now you're really talking, okay, here we go. And Durango has experience. So I think that the Browns are, hey, this guy's got experience, but at the same time, he's just not that good of a player. He's probably a replacement level type of player. Let's stick with that offensive line now. Bitonio over there on the left tackle position. When they made that change, how do you feel about it? And do you think this is something that's actually going to work?
That's a good question. So far, so good. I was okay with the move. I actually would have preferred moving Austin Corbett there because I think he can handle it. But it seems like the plan, and it's nice that they have a plan, by the way, because there's a lot of teams that will be reactionary on this and screw things up. I think putting Bitonio there, Bitonio seems to be doing pretty well. Myles Garrett has mentioned that he's having trouble getting wins on him. That's good. Myles Garrett's pretty dang good. So I'm okay with it.
That's what people say.
yeah. People talk about that. And Corbett, I think, has a very bright future as a left guard. So if it works, great. And I'm glad that they're trying something. I'm glad that they realized quickly that Sean Coleman cannot play left tackle because he cannot play left tackle. No, not a chance. I'm not sure he can play right tackle either, but he sure as hell couldn't play left tackle. So I'm okay with it. And so far the early returns seem pretty good.
They also have Greg Robinson there who played tackle behind Bitonio. Now you covered the Lions last year, right? Also. Yeah. Okay, so you had Greg Robinson for a little bit in Detroit. Is there any hope of Greg Robinson contributing to this team?
I really don't think so. The Lions tried him at left tackle. They tried him at right tackle. They tried him at right guard. He has a bad habit, and he had it when he was in college, and nobody picked up on it. I shouldn't say nobody. Some of us did, and tried to warn people. In pass protection, his first move is to go forward every time. This is 5 years later. He's still doing it. It's just not something that's ever going to go away. He just doesn't understand the kinetics and the physiology and the football geometry of playing offensive line. He's a freak athlete, still a freak athlete, but as far as it doesn't translate for him to football, and if it hasn't now, it is never going to happen.
Yeah, once again, that's seems to be a major problem going forward. Something that they're going to have to work out. Hopefully, Todd Haley can talk to Hugh into the O-line, at least not taking any days off, because it seems like we need as much work as we can get there. Let's get to the topic that everybody's talking about. I mean, quarterback Tyrod Baker. Is this thing, in your opinion, even a competition, or is this a closed book, Tyrod all the way?
I still think I think Tyrod is definitely going to start the first game, and I think he's going to start as long as the team is still competitive and has some hope of postseason glimmer. And that could be 6 weeks. It could be 10 weeks. It could be 14 weeks. Who knows on how it's going to play out, because I do think this team has the talent to, at minimum, get out of the basement of the AFC North. Tyrod, you watched the game. He was literally perfect on his throws. There was a lot to like. There's absolutely no reason for anyone to be upset with Tyrod Taylor being the starting quarterback. But you got Baker Mayfield there, and Baker looked pretty good too. He had some issues, and I think some of us in Cleveland are overlooking. He wasn't perfect. He made a couple of iffy decisions, but he showed so much promise as a number one pick, and it's hard to keep that on the sideline. But that's going to be a fun challenge for Hugh, balancing that all year, because you've got a quality veteran, a guy who took Buffalo to their first playoff appearance in the 21st century last year, with less talent, by the way, than is in Cleveland right now. So that's a pretty darn good track record. The thing is, though, Tyrod knew the deal when he came here. He's on a 1-year deal. He knew that they were taking a quarterback number one. He chose to come here anyways. So he has to have an understanding that his time is going to be limited. And if Baker is pushing him, I hope it's not a case where like Tyrod is like 10 for 21 in the first half of a game with a couple of picks. And that's when Baker comes in. I don't think that's the right situation. I would do it either like if they're up, let's say they're up on Cincinnati 30-10, and I think that's a very realistic possibility, that you let Baker play, the final 5 or 6 drives of the game. That's where it needs to happen. And then I do think late in the year, unless the Browns are in the playoffs, you let Baker start the last 2 or 3 games. And I honestly, I think Tyrod would be okay with that. I mean, the competitor in him would be pissed off, but he understands the greater good of the team. I think if there's any one takeaway that you get from Tyrod Taylor in training camp, and you'll see it on Hard Knocks, the guy is all about the team more than himself. That to his own detriment in some cases, but if it works for Cleveland, that's what you need.
Yeah, that's tough to do, especially when you're coming in. You've only got a year, and then you're actually professional enough to say, hey, I got this kid behind me, and I'm gonna show him how to do some things as a pro, and just super professional.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned Hugh. That's a problem that Hugh will have to balance. Well, I think that's the one thing Hugh struggles at, balancing any problems by the looks of the last 2 years. So we'll see how that is going forward.
Yeah, that quarterback circus last year was interesting. Kaiser's in, Kaiser's out. Let's put Kessler out there. How about Hogan? How about Kaiser for the second half?
Right.
I mean, come on.
And that's a good point that Jeff made. Like switching him in at the end of the half or something. That's not doing Baker any justice. I think a lot of it's probably going to have to come down to record. If the Browns get off to a horrible start, you might be seeing Baker a lot earlier than what we thought. We might, but. I seem to agree with Jeff here. Like, I like the way the Browns are set up, and I think they can compete in these games. So if Tyrod just plays the way Tyrod can, we should be in a lot of these games. We shouldn't be, we should be sitting at like 500 after 8 games and not 2-6. Let's get over to the defensive line. You watch the game. You probably feel the same way we do as like, what can you even get out of that defense? Like, what can we even see from that defense last Thursday night? Because the quarterback play by the Giants was so horrendous that I'm not even sure we could evaluate our defense. Did you see anything that Greg Williams was doing that was different from last year at all? Or was he running the same stuff, in your opinion?
It seemed like he kept it fairly plain because plain worked against them. Their offensive line isn't. Their starters were a lot better than they were last year. The Giants' offensive line last year was god awful. Their starters looked better, but their depth is still just brutal.
Right.
And I think Williams knew that he could attack with just his base attack and get success. And you didn't see it from the guys on the inside, but I think the edges played pretty well, and I think the linebackers. Even the depth linebackers, guys like B.J. Bello and James Burgess, I thought were flying all over the field. And the Giants quarterback play. Oh my God, Davis Webb, what the hell?
Boy, he missed some wide open guys there, man. He missed some wide open guys. The one E.J. Gaines was absolutely toasted on. I think it was Randall was the wide receiver.
Yes,
and
yes, it was.
That looked like Kaiser. How many times Kaiser missed Njoku last year wide open on those?
Davis Webb is Josh Allen without the flair. That's what it is.
Right. Oh, geez. What did so what do you think of this linebacker group? Then Kendricks comes in. He gets what do you have, 2 sacks or just one on Thursday?
He had one. He had another pressure. He played very well, and it was nice to see him fit in. And watching him, he didn't practice any of the days that I was in Berea, but he was active on the sidelines and involved and talking to the teammates and everything. So I think it's a very good addition, and having depth is not a bad thing. And it also gives him the opportunity, like,
let's say somebody is desperate for a versatile outside linebacker who can rush the passer and who can cover a little bit, and they want to give John Dorsey a 2nd-round pick for Jamie Collins. Just hypothetical here. They can make that move, and that's something that I think Dorsey would certainly entertain because they have that kind of depth. I was very pleased with the play of the second level of the defense, the linebackers and the safeties at that second level. Peppers and Kindred and
who's the other? There was another safety
who played really well.
Deron Smith was out there.
Deron Smith. Thank you. That's who I was talking about. He had a great game. He actually made my studs of the game from guys who really played well. That open field tackle that he made on that screen pass or swing pass, that was fantastic. That is exactly what Greg Williams is screaming about when he's having happy dreams. That was exactly what you saw there. So there's some depth on that backside too.
Well, you brought up the trade scenario. That's something that has been talked about. Like there should maybe one more. John Dorsey's not done with these moves. I think everybody kind of assumes that Jamie Collins would be the odd man out here with the contract being as high as it is. I think it would be tough to really get much for him because of that contract. Really going to lower his value. But do you think Jamie Collins is the only one there on the bubble when you're looking at that linebacker group? Because I tend to think that even Kirksey, Schobert, one of these other guys, there might be another guy that they're really thinking about moving other than him.
That wouldn't surprise me at all. And I do think that Dorsey is going to listen to offers, and people are going to call because the Browns do have depth in abundance there. There's they could trade Derek Kindred as a guy who I can see getting moved. I think they'll keep Schobert because I think his youth and the fact that he played in the Pro Bowl last year, I think they're cognizant that it would be a perception that the Browns are trading away young talent again. Why are they doing that? I think you can get away with that a little bit more with Kirksey because he is a little bit older. He's a very good player, but he's sort of limited in what he does. I don't want to compare him to DeQuell Jackson because they're very different players, but DeQuell had like certain things that he was really good at and the rest of it wasn't very good. And I get that with Kirksey too. And he might, because you have Kendricks there and because I think James Burgess has played very well when he played last year too. I think that gives them some flexibility and justification to fans where they could sell that, okay, you know what, this does make us better. You can't give him away for what you gave Corey Coleman away for, but if you can get something higher up the ladder, I think that works pretty well. And yeah, you're right. Collins' contract makes him a tough sell to other teams because he's not worth that. He's a good player, but he's not worth, he's still, I think, the 6th highest paid linebacker in the league. He's not a top 10 linebacker. He's a top 20, 25 linebacker.
I agree with you there.
That's going to make him a tough sell.
Especially coming off pretty severe knee injury. Yeah. Sorry, Adam, go ahead.
It's just sort of with the NFL as it's played today. It's such a passing league, and you've got 4 or 5 linebackers that can play. You can't get them on the field all at the same time. I mean, the defenses are going to base nickel. You want safety, or if you have linebackers that can cover. We struggled so badly with our linebackers covering last year, tight ends, when they weren't blitzing every other play. But it seems like linebacker depth is nice to have, but you can't even get these guys enough snaps.
Yeah, and you're running a 4-3 defense, and I have chastised, and as a lot of people have, Greg for playing 3 linebackers in against on 3rd and 3. They still had 3 linebackers, or 3rd and 10. He would still have 3 linebackers in it. He was so reluctant to go to nickel. It's nice to have that, but at some point you have to realize that, hey, I think the Browns have 3 starting safeties on the team too. And, just to go to the Detroit Lions for a second, the Lions' base defense now is a 3-3-5. It sort of morphs out of that too, but there are always 5 defensive backs on the field, and most of the time there are 6 defensive backs on the field. And a lot of teams are like that. If you watch the Atlanta Falcons, their base defense appears to be a 4-1-5 or 4-1-6. There's a lot of that going on around the league, and the Browns are sort of throwing it back the opposite direction.
Because you have Kirksey and Peppers, you can get them on the field at the same time. Well, that's going to pull a linebacker off the field.
Right.
It just becomes tough to get those guys playing time.
I think you look at the Eagles now. Kendricks got more snaps last year, but he was having a tough time getting snaps when he was with Philadelphia because of that. They play 2 linebackers all the time, and then they use Malcolm. What's his name?
Jenkins.
Slipping my mind. Yeah, Malcolm Jenkins as that extra nickel. He's like their nickel guy, and he's basically like an extra strong safety in my opinion. He can cover, he can come up, play the run. When I look at the Browns roster with Peppers and Kindred, I think you can do that. But if you're playing and both guys give you better coverage than what you can get out of these linebackers, I personally would like them to just go with 2 linebackers and then, have Peppers and Kindred in there a lot more, and even Body Calhoun. These are good players that you're taking off the field for extra linebackers who have struggled in coverage.
And it will be very interesting to see how they align that when they're playing a team like Pittsburgh that runs a base package with 1 back, 3 wide receivers all the time. And they're not the only team that does that.
You think they'll continue to do that with no Todd Haley, though? So maybe they could be switching.
Well, yeah, that's a question because he's not doing that in Cleveland. So,
right,
again, the Browns' depth on offense is running back and tight end. I think tight end depth is great. DeValve didn't play. I think you saw a lot to like from the other guys that are there, aside from Njoku being fantastic. I think Darren Fells offers this team a lot. I really do. So there's and Devon Cajuste. That's a guy who deserves to be on an NFL roster. He looked great. He was great in camp. He's a converted wide receiver. That's a useful player that the Browns are probably going to cut. I don't know, man. You got to find places for these guys who can play to get on the field.
Well, you had Darren. You covered probably a lot of Darren Fells last year in Detroit, and that's the one thing we've been lacking. We've had no blocking whatsoever. I think, and I could be wrong here, so that's why I'm asking you. Darren Fells gives us that inline blocker that we really have been lacking, in my opinion. Is that?
Oh yeah, definitely. He's 6'7", 265, former basketball player, knows how to use his hands and his butt to keep people away from the quarterback. That's what he's best at.
Yeah.
He's also a pass catcher too, or he plays in line just basically.
I mean, Baker's been hitting them pretty good.
Yeah, he's an inline guy. He can flare out. He caught a pass last year, his 1 touchdown in Detroit, where he released off of a block and the defense completely ignored him, and Matthew Stafford could have walked and handed it to him. But he can catch the ball when you throw it to him. Nice. He does have decent hands.
I know we talked about the safeties and linebackers. What about, so we got Denzel Ward 4th overall. Looks like he's tabbed as an instant starter. And then we sort of have a few quote unquote cast-offs. TJ Carey, EJ Gaines, and Terrence Mitchell, I think, coming out of KC. Who do you expect sort of to be starting or get the most playing time? And are those guys any good?
It's still up in the air who's going to win it. Terrence Mitchell played his way into the starting role for the first game because he's the best with the ball in the air. He's very active at attacking the football, and that seems to be something that Greg Williams covets. He did not play all that well in the opener. He was all right. I think he got bailed out, as did Ward, by the way, from receivers making mistakes more than him being good in coverage. And one of the big takeaways that I had from watching the game the second time, and I did focus a lot on Ward, he wasn't as good as I thought the coverage of him was, aside from the taunting penalty, which he earned, by the way. You can't do that in the NFL. I'm okay with that in a preseason game, though. If you want to set the tone, that's the time to do it. But
Agreed,
don't
yeah.
do that in a regular season game. No, that ain't going to fly. Carey played great in the opener. I thought he was fantastic. I think Pro Football Focus noted that he allowed 1 reception on 6 routes. Again, the Giants receivers and quarterbacks were terrible, so some of that is stilted that way. I thought he looked really good. He did not look good in camp any of the days that I was there, and I'm an Ohio Bobcat, and he's one of the few Bobcats in the NFL, so I'm pulling really hard for him. I'm like, dude, you got to play better. Come on.
Right.
So that's there. Gaines is a guy, he plays in the slot. He plays outside. He's He's sort of a little bit more hyped. Being Buddy Calhoun, who is one of my very favorite players around the entire league. I love Body. I think that guy's fantastic. I wish he was on the field all the time. Yeah. I think they're sorting out where that's going to go yet, and that's something that we definitely have to watch as the preseason plays out.
I'm with you. Anything else, Adam?
No, I guess we're creeping up here on 45 minutes. So
yeah, that's what I was looking at.
Yeah, other thing I can think of was watch the kickers. I think Gonzalez is in a little bit more of a battle than I think he thought he was.
Ooh.
He's doing fine, and I think he's going to win it. But he's got a little bit of a challenge there. It's fun to watch that. You know, incumbent kickers always have the advantage, especially when they're a draft pick. But right. The other guy in town, he can kick too.
Yeah, we don't. We are always very rude to our kickers, to be honest. we give them no coverage whatsoever. That little 30-second clip that you just did is the most coverage we've had in 3 years on kickers. So
there you go. You know, it's funny. I do NFL draft stuff as sort of my passion project. And I alternate every year. Like 1 year I'll do punters, and the other year I'll do kickers. And I can't tell you how many people are like, I can't believe you're covering the punters. Thank you. I'm like, really?
Right, yeah.
There you go.
Are you sure? Who are you? It's like the punter's mom.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah,
it's ex-punters. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Punters people too, Jeff. Come on.
Yes, they are. That's right.
Awesome, man. I appreciate you doing this and coming in and talking to us for a while. Where can people find your work?
Yeah, sure. You can find me at Browns Wire. It's the USA Today team sites thing. We have a new app out, and I'll give you guys a little hint here. The app cuts back on the ads. So use the app.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay.
So it's the Sports Wire app from USA Today. Browns Wire is there. If you happen to like the Lions too, I'm the managing editor for the Lions Wire as well. I'm at realgm.com if you want to do more around the league and sort of long form stuff. That's also where most of my draft stuff goes. I got pieces coming up on that. I do a weekly 10-cent piece that gets really good reception. I'm not afraid to pull punches on people that don't normally get punched. So that's sort of the fun part of that. I'm on Twitter at Jeff Risdon, Risdon. You can find me there. I try to be as interactive as possible. It's weird. It's somewhat disappointing that the more followers I get, the less interactive I can be, just because I get so many mentions. I can't keep up with everybody, but I try my best on that. So that's where you can find me. You'll find me. I'm a Vermilion native. I'll actually be in Vermilion next week. We'll try to be out at Browns camp, and if we get enough interest for it, I will try to get a little get together for Browns fans. It's fun. We did one, the Browns Wire. We had a Browns Wire staff meeting at Mike's in Berea a couple weeks ago. That was great. The people who were sitting around us hearing us talk, and Pete Smith from somewhere with Fansided. Pete's a great guy. I love him. We were arguing as we do, and it had everybody in the bar was sort of
come on.
Yeah, no kidding.
Not the Pete I know.
Yeah, exactly. And people around us were like entertained enough that like they were like, "Hey, can you turn the house music off? We want to listen to these guys." So we want to stuff like that too.
That's awesome.
Yeah, good stuff, Jeff. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks again, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys.
All right, buddy. We'll see you next time. There it was, fellas. Jeff Risdon. Thank you so much again, Jeff, for coming on. That was awesome. We are on Twitter at STS Podcasts. Our email is survivingtheseason@gmail.com. You can hit us up on Patreon at STS Podcast as well. Shout out to Brian Gallagher. Thank you, buddy. To all of our executive producers, thank you so much. Greg, anything else?
No, that is all.
#Road to Redemption.
#Road to Redemption.
Tell them what we say.
Keep on surviving.